Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tracing the incredible journey of a single powerful idea through centuries of history, from ancient texts all the way to modern political movements.
So this quote from televangelist Kenneth Copeland, it really gets to the heart of the modern word of faith movement. The idea here is that faith isn't just, a belief. It's a tangible force. And that our words, when they're filled with that faith, can literally create and change our reality.
You might think this sounds like a pretty modern, maybe uniquely American invention, but its roots go way, way back. Not just decades, but millennia. So let's start the journey.
Okay, so our story doesn't begin in a church. It starts with ancient mystical traditions, things like Hermeticism and Gnosticism. And these schools of thought, they had a really radical view of our connection to the divine.
At the very core of this belief was a concept called nous, basically a universal divine mind. This wasn't some distant god on a cloud. It was an organizing intelligence that was in everything, and it was something we could all connect with.
These ancient texts taught a powerful kind of logic. If the entire cosmos comes from one source, then every single person must carry a divine spark inside them. And what that meant was that the path to knowing God wasn't outward, but inward, through self-knowledge, or what they called gnosis.
And this wasn't just some philosophical idea, They saw it as a literal spiritual map. The soul's journey was this step-by-step path of purification. It was like peeling away layers of earthly stuff, ego, desire, all that, to finally get back to your divine origin. All right, now let's hit the fast-forward button by a few thousand years to see how these ancient ideas, after kind of lying dormant for centuries, popped up again in a completely new place, 19th century America. And this is where the mystical starts to get really practical. Writers like James Allen took that old concept of an internal divine spark and they totally reframed it. The idea became simple and incredibly powerful. Your inner world of thought directly creates your outer world of circumstances, period.
Then a guy named Ernest Holmes came along and systematized all this into what he called science of mind. He basically taught that the universe runs on mental laws, just like it runs on physical laws like gravity. Thought wasn't just some activity in your head. It was a creative power you could scientifically apply to shape your reality.
And this right here, this is the absolute game changer. The New Thought movement took these mystical ideas and packaged them as a practical, almost scientific method. It wasn't just about spiritual ascension after you die anymore. It was about controlling your health, your wealth, and your destiny, right here and now.
Okay, but the story doesn't stop there. In fact, this is where the idea takes its next major leap. This whole metaphysical framework, this science of mind, was about to be adopted, adapted, and basically absorbed into a new form of charismatic Christianity.
Now, this transformation didn't happen overnight, right? It was more like a slow handoff between a few key people. A guy named E.W. Kenyon is often seen as the essential bridge here. He took the language of New Thought and he masterfully blended it with Christian doctrine, which paved the way for leaders like Kenneth Hagin.
And the translation was just so direct. The universal mind of New Thought, that became the power of God. The creative force of thought became the force of faith, and positive thinking got a rebrand as positive confession, the idea that you speak Bible verses out loud to activate God's power. So the takeaway from this was, well, it was huge and pretty controversial. The implication was if believers could tap into and use the same creative force of faith that God used to create the universe, then, in a sense, they were operating as little gods right here on Earth. But the evolution of this idea wasn't finished. It didn't just stop at personal health and success. In the last few decades, it has morphed into this sweeping vision with massive social and political goals, mainly through a movement called the New Apostolic Reformation. So the NAR, what it does is it builds directly on top of Word of Faith theology, but then it adds this really critical new layer of leadership. It argues that the biblical offices of apostle and prophet are back, and these modern-day leaders are destined to govern not just the church, but all of society. And their game plan, their primary strategy for making the societal transformation happen, is a concept they call the Seven Mountain Mandate. It's basically their roadmap for influence.
So the mandate calls for believers to strategically climb to the top of these 7 core areas of cultural influence. The whole point is to take dominion over each mountain, and by doing that, shape the entire culture from the top down.
And you have to understand this is a pretty big deal, theologically speaking. It completely flips the script on a lot of traditional end times beliefs.
It basically argues that it's the church's job to first create a perfected global Christian kingdom on earth to set the stage for Jesus' return.
So when you step back and look at it, what began as this mystical internal journey of the soul, the power of human consciousness to connect with the divine, has been transformed over millennia. It became a practical formula for personal success, and now a political mandate for global influence.
It's a really stunning evolution. It just goes to show how a single, powerful idea can adapt and grow across cultures and centuries. And it leaves us all to wonder, what's the next stop on the journey for this ancient and very potent concept?